There you are at the War College. My heart skipped a beat when I heard the first cases on board the Big Stick, the USS Theodore Roosevelt, a carrier which, when you think about it, might as well be a virus carrier, a floating city of 5,000. And I note, of course, that the 1918 Spanish flu, the military, sadly, was a force multiplier for that illness.
Yeah, although the 1918 flu was unique because it began where a group of people were being trained, and then they were sent all over the country and then to Europe to fight a war. I think this is a somewhat different situation. The hotspot is in New York, in part because of all of the travel. And so, you know, the Defense Department, which, of course, as you say, I don't represent, but they're definitely, certainly here in Newport, we've been taking really stringent measures, not being at the base, things like that. So, you know, I think that they're facing the same problem that everybody else is. But I think the one difference with the 1918 flu is that it started here, and then we cast all of these men all over the country and then all over the European continent, which made it a lot worse.
Still, I worry about on vessels, submarines, social distancing is not an option. I worry about barracks and the like. How far are we from leadership as taught at a place like your institution?
Well, anybody who's ever been on a submarine can tell you social distancing, you know, is a matter of inches rather than feet. I think as a general rule about leadership, one of the things we're seeing here is that the president, as a leader, is simply incapable of putting the needs of others before himself. Whatever he may have, whatever problems he may have with Gretchen Whitmer, the governor of Michigan, or Andrew Cuomo, the governor of New York, leadership is about doing the job and biting your tongue at moments like that to get things done. I think what we're seeing is a real-time laboratory in all of the wrong lessons of leadership. What we're seeing is somebody who simply cannot put the people that he is sworn to protect ahead of himself and ahead of his feelings. And I think that that's having an effect on the way we're able to respond to this.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.